Hi, my name is Ann Blair, and I'm the Karl Pforzheimer University Professor in the Department of History at Harvard University. And I'm delighted that a Spanish book has just come out, Al margen del texto. This is a book, a small book, for people interested in the history of books, a big topic. In the history of the codex form as a tool for managing information even before printing. And then it's about the impact of printing, informing new conventions for the presentation of texts to readers. So the book has two parts, translated from two different books I've published in different languages. The first part is the introduction and first chapter of this book, Too Much to Know, published in English in 2010. There, I talk about the theme of information overload and how it was present centuries before our digital age and our sensation of overload. And I study the techniques that scholars devised to manage that overload in antiquity, in the Middle Ages, but especially in the era of the hand press, especially reference books and indexes that promised to give you insight into all those other books you wouldn't have the time or the means to access. The second part is a complete translation of a short book, L'Entour du texte, la publication du livre savant à la Renaissance, published in 2021. In this part, I examine with lots of illustrations what we call paratexts of books by two learned authors of the Renaissance. So paratexts are all the writings that surround the text itself that help explain it and package it for the reader. And the two learned authors I focus on are Desiderius Erasmus, known as the Prince of Humanists in his day, who published more than 250 works in his lifetime from 1466 to 1536. And a somewhat less well-known humanist, a wonderful polymath, Conrad Gessner of Zurich, 1516 to 65, who published dozens of books on natural history, bibliography, medicine, and philology. Early printed books are fascinating to study. On the one hand, the first 100 or 150 years of printing is the period when many conventions of the printed book became established that we still use today. Title page, pagination, for example, are quite rare in medieval manuscripts, but become the norm in printed books after roughly 1500. The table of contents, the alphabetical index, did exist in some medieval manuscripts, but they became more common and familiar to more readers through their presence in printed books. But on the other hand, this is also a period of great experimentation, both in techniques of printing and in how texts were presented. And one place where authors and printers experimented a lot is the paratexts, all those little pieces of writing that come before and after the text itself. We call them today front matter and back matter, for example. The most important paratexts in this period are the title page, dedication to a patron, hoping, of course, to get a gift in return, preface from the author to the reader explaining what the book is about and how to use it, table of contents, and alphabetical index. But early printed books often included other paratexts too that we don't know about today, like poems of praise for your work from your friends, or maybe you wrote the poem, but you say someone else did, or that it's anonymous. Or how about including a prayer in your book, or a prayer translated into 6 different languages like Conrad Gessner did, or a bibliography of books on the topic and a list of people who helped you. In one of his books, Gessner has so many paratexts, more than a dozen of them, that he gives you a table of contents of the paratexts, so you won't get lost in them before you even reach the text itself. A recent development that's really exciting for the study of early printed books is that vast numbers of them are now available completely free, digitized on the internet, from websites like the Munich Digitization Center, MDZ, or e-rara.ch out of Switzerland, or Gallica out of the French National Library in Paris. So with a little Google exploring to get to these finding devices, these web portals, anyone can look at high quality scans of the books I discuss, and you can find cool things there yourself. Something I really enjoyed in working on this topic was pondering the similarities and the differences between the impact of the spread of printing in Renaissance Europe and the impact of the internet in my lifetime. So many aspects of the context are completely different. A huge difference, for example, is that only a minority of the population could read in the Renaissance. So printing couldn't directly impact that many people right away. But we do know that people who couldn't read learned about printed texts through others reading those texts aloud to them or talking about them, for example. And of course, by contrast, today we have near universal literacy, and the internet has changed things for almost every kind of activity over the last 20 years. Nevertheless, I would argue that the basic ways of managing information and the basic need to do that are quite recognizable across these centuries. And I call these basic methods the 4 S's: selecting, summarizing, sorting, and storing. We get help from computers to do this now, but we also use our minds all the time. So we do an internet search, we're reading a book, for example, we focus on some things of special interest. That's the selecting process. And then we might paraphrase them or summarize them for ourselves so we can put them in our own words and use them again later. And then when we want to find them again, we have to put them in mental categories, either in our minds or by recording them somewhere on paper or our computer under categories that we think are interesting, where we'll look for them again. And then we hope that whatever we put the stuff in will be durable and will still be there later when we want to use it. And of course, computers pose special challenges in that way. There's a kind of ephemerality with the digital text. Your phone, for example, if you replace it, what's going to happen to everything that's on there? You have to be very careful about bringing it over to the next platform. If it's ink on paper, of course, you mustn't lose that piece of paper or you won't find it again. The best place, of course, is in the mind. But as we know, the mind runs out of capacity rather fast. So I'm all in favor of offloading things into external memories like computers or paper. And people were using these techniques, the selecting, summarizing, sorting, and storing, even before printing. I talk about methods of information management in Greco-Roman antiquity, the European Middle Ages, also for the purposes of comparison with Chinese and Islamic methods. But of course, the printed book offered a hugely powerful tool, which has been really the crucial method of information management for the last 500 years. So today we have a glut of printed books. In my town, people put books out on the sidewalk to give them away, and they make cute little libraries where anyone can take a book or leave a book. So it seems like books have lost their value, but it's still the case that it can be hard to find a particular book that you need. It's checked out of a library, it's out of print, it's not available digitally, or it's very expensive. So books are still very precious for their contents. And in some cases, of course, like the ones I discuss in my book, also for their beauty, their age, and their rarity. And books are also major carriers of cultural and personal significance. I expect many of us remember a particular copy of a book we read maybe when we were a child and are sad not to have anymore. And even finding a different edition of the book just isn't the same as that personal copy we once had. But also those who favor reading in digital media experience the impact of the format of the codex, because digital books reproduce so many features of physical books, whether it's fake page turning or alphabetical indexing. So I think we need to savor the physical book, even as I also use digital books and scans like I was describing, because they are convenient. I like to have both insofar as possible and appreciate the values of each. I expect that readers attend to paratexts in different ways, depending on the kind of book it is and why they're interested in it. The paratext is full of fascinating clues about the people who produced the book, the author, but also maybe an editor, or as in this book, a translator, and of course, the production team at the press. So for someone like me, who reads a lot of books and writes some too, the paratexts are what I look at first to understand what a book has to offer, figure out how much of it I want to read. But of course, there are times when I just want to get right into the text. I'm in a hurry. I prefer to be surprised rather than prepared ahead of time about what to expect when I read the book. This conversation, in fact, that we're having right now is really a paratext outside the book. Gérard Genette would have called it an epitext. And maybe you'd like to listen to this conversation before reading the book, but maybe not. It's up to you. That's what a paratext is. It's something there available to you if you'd like. And a big advantage of the codex form is that the reader can easily move around in the text and skip to where they're most interested, and there won't be a quiz afterwards. You ask about how this has changed over time. That's hard to know, how readers in the past experienced their books, because unless they wrote about that experience or left marginal annotations, we really don't know much about it. It's sometimes hard to know ourselves what the impact of reading is. in our own minds. But as someone who likes to look at marginal annotations to track, to the extent that we can, what readers paid attention to and what they were reading, I have noticed that readers didn't just annotate the text, they also annotated the paratexts. For example, readers correct errors by adding things or correcting page numbers in the table of contents or the index. And I've also seen readers underline striking turns of phrase in a dedication or a preface, as if they might want to reuse that expression themselves. So the paratexts have always interested readers, and I hope that they will continue to exist, even as they no doubt will evolve in digital media. Honestly, I think it's a loss when a digital edition of a book leaves out the paratext that was present in the printed edition. We need books in both forms, digital and print. And I'm very grateful to everyone who made this Spanish book possible. I hope you enjoy it.